Narcissists are usually looking for kind of this validation or this kind of, they're feeding off of a certain validation. And their main, for some of them, some like kind of more like very negative forms of narcissism, their only goal is to get something out of the person, some kind of validation, some kind of a tribute.
Yeah.
And being in a relationship with a narcissist also, it's like you constantly need to feed their narcissistic urges.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Human Library podcast. For today's episode, your host is going to be me and Aslan. Unfortunately, Mehdi couldn't join us for personal reasons, but he for sure will be back. He will be missed.
He will be missed and he will be back next episode.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So for this episode, the topic, the most awaited topic that we have to discuss today is narcissism. It's quite appealing and it's very interesting for many people. So we're just gonna jump right into it.
Yeah, it's kind of like a buzzword, like very like everyone throws it around. Like he's narcissistic, like it's a very common thing.
Yeah.
So we'll try to delve deeper into it and give you kind of like
the origin of the definition, like the different types, where it's coming from. Also, like, as always, if you're more interested into the topic, you are more than welcome to do more research about it. Because I don't think we can talk this enough even for like the length of this episode, because it's very intrinsic and goes very deep.
Yeah, it's kind of like an intro. Well, not even intro, but kind of in-depth intro to the topic. Let's put it that way.
I like that. All right. So where does the word narcissism comes from? So as many things in this world, it comes from the ancient Greeks. It comes from like the Greek mythology of Echo and Narciso. So let's just go back into the basic of the myth. Echo was a beautiful forest nymph who used to love to have the last word in every conversation. And one time she was strolling in the woods and she sees Zeus having his way with a few nymphs there in the woods. And then from like the corner of her eye, she sees Hera, Zeus' wife, approaching him to confront him and like catching him right in the spot, because Zeus was an amazing god that used to do this all the time. So Echo, instead of helping Hera to reach Zeus, she does the opposite. She tells Zeus that Hera is coming, and then she like stalls Hera, like just telling her how beautiful she is, like amazing the clothes that she's wearing. So she gives enough time for Zeus to leave, to vanish. So when Hera arrives into the location, Zeus is no longer there. But Hera is not dumb. She knew perfectly well that Echo was actually like withstalling her and was like tricking her so Zeus could escape. So she punishes Echo with the curse of always repeating the last word that she heard. So she gets very depressed because she can no longer talk anymore. She only repeats the last word that she hears. So she's like walking around still in the same woods, very depressed. And then far away, she sees this beautiful young boy, Narciso. Narciso, this astonishing man. She has never seen such beauty in her life before. She jumps to him. She runs like toward him just to like hug him and be like wanting to tell him like I'm in love with you. You're the most beautiful man I have ever seen. But she cannot talk. So he's like, what are you doing? And she just repeats, doing. So he gets a little bit like hostigated and basically pushes her away and rejects her and then runs away from her. So she gets more depressed and she keeps walking in the woods and she finds other nymphs that were rejected by Narciso as well. And they're very angry, very angry. So they call upon the goddess of vengeance to punish Narciso for being rejected by him. So she punishes him to be in a way that he will never fall in love, if I'm not mistaken. He will never fall in love with anyone, but only with himself. So Narciso is just like going in life like not meeting anyone that will be the same caliber as him or like meet his expectations. So one time he's walking alongside the river and he sees his beautiful face like on the water in the river, like being like reflected on the water. So he just stays there like impressed by his own beauty, and every time he tries to touch the water, like it will be like it will move around and the face will no longer like be seen perfectly fine, and he will be like angry because of that. And then when he was able to see his face, he will be again like rejoiceful and be very happy to be able to see his own reflection. And he stays there for days and days at the same time, just looking at himself until he becomes very, very weak because he has not eaten, he has not drunk any, like a drop of water. And he tries to reach one more time his own reflection and he falls into the river. And because he has absolutely no strength, he drowns. And where he actually died, this beautiful flower comes out of it that is called Narciso, the Narcissus flower. And the Narciso flower is famous because it turns around and looks itself on the water as well, like the reflection of itself in the water, like mimicking Narciso doing the same thing, right? And then, according to the myth, Narciso, while he's being transported by Caronte in the river to go to the underworld, he was still looking at his reflection in the famous river of the dead. And yeah, it's super crazy, right? And then Echo, by hearing this, that Narciso had died, she abandons all faith and goes into like just by herself into the mountains without anyone else, and she stays there for eternity, repeating the last word that she hears from people that pass by and yell her name: Echo, Echo, Echo. And that's like basically the myth, right? That's the story, the history, or the Greek mythology, the mythology behind Echo and Narcissisms. And that's the origin of the word narcissism, right? This person who is so infatuated by themselves.
Yeah, so this myth gives kind of a lot of context to the to narcissism as a concept and as a kind of a condition. And also we'll start with a bit more about the developmental aspect of narcissism, since in the story it's a child technically, right? He's a young kid,
a young boy. But well, in ancient Greece, people tend to become adults very younger, because lifespan was still a little bit So but in our perspective, he was still very young.
And I think in the Roman myth, his parents, I don't know if it was in the Greek one or not, but in the Roman myth, his parents were kind of a bigger part of the story, where they so in the Roman myth, his parents are kind of worried about his beauty. Like they're kind of obsessed with him in a weird way, and they go to a prophet Tiresias to learn about this kid's future, like what's waiting for him. And he says that the boy will grow old only if he did not get to know himself. And so in the Roman myth, it's more about the kind of more developmental, let's say, story, kind of about the parents obsessing over a kid, and this kid obviously being narcissistic, like being prone to narcissism. And really good-looking, kind of beautiful children, or talented children,
out of the ordinary, right? Like, too good to be true type of thing.
They those kind of children end up being like are more likely to end up being narcissistic. And in childhood, there's this concept of primary narcissism, which was coined by Heinz Kohalt, who studied narcissism a lot in his patients, and he was a theorist. Basically it's actually a very healthy and normal condition for a lot of children to have kind of this primary narcissism. It's kind of healthy to have that because it sets them up for their future life. So, for example, when children, and I'm sure a lot of people can probably relate to this and remember their childhood, but they would kind of show off or like try to like one up each other.
Yeah.
In a kind of like
fight for the attention of one of the parents or for both of them with your siblings. Or like even at school, right? Like show your friends that you can do this amazing trick.
Yeah, exactly. Or like I can do better than you and I am better than you and like that kind of a thing. So it's a very normal thing where you're trying to kind of you're getting a feel for
like builds character.
Being an adult, you know?
Yeah. It helps build character in a certain aspect.
And yeah, that's kind of like the healthy aspect of narcissism, which goes on until about the age of 8 for most children. But yeah, maybe you can tell us more about what narcissism is also as a concept and kind of definition of it. And
we're gonna go with like the basics, right? So the psychological definition of narcissism, it's an inflated, grandiose self-image of an individual that believes that he or she is better looking, smarter, more important than other people, and that they believe they deserve special treatment. Like that's the most common definition of a narcissist. I'm pretty sure most of us have heard this in a certain way or concept. And then like the two forms more recognized or more popular or more famous of type of narcissists are like the grandiose and the vulnerable one. There's also one called the narcissistic personality disorder, but this is a very more extreme one, and as his name says, it's already a disorder, so it's a mental health issue. So in all people in certain behaviors, we all do it. We have some narcissistic traits in us, some more than others. But it's type of a behavior that is learned from social activities like growing up, like what you said before, or like enveloped on your pillars in education of your home, or following up like the behavior of your parents. So it is quite common and it's normal that there's a certain percentage of type of narcissistic in all of us. So don't worry, if you sometimes act narcissistic, it's not the end of the world. You just have to be careful how you do it. I guess we're going to talk about that later in this one. So going back to the two main ones, the grandiose, it is very better described as they pursue attention and power, mainly this type of narcissist behavior. They're mainly extroverts. They believe or they act in dominance, and they are attention seekers. So there's someone that likes to be the light in the room, you know, like to have all the attention for themselves. Then the other one is called the vulnerable one, which they're more quiet and reserved. They have a very strong sense of entitlement, and they're easily threatened. So they're the type of people that they believe they're always better than everyone else. So many of them don't even deserve to be in the same room with them, which is weird, no? Like the mental aspect. I'm gonna quote this saying: for the psychological disorder, the narcissistic personality disorder, I'm gonna just like explain a little bit brief. It is a disease where the one that suffers feels pretty good, but the ones that surround him or her are the ones that suffer.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, right? Yeah. And then from this disorder, it affects 1 to 2% of the population and is more common in men. It's, as I said before, it's reserved on adults because kids tend to be, they haven't developed themselves properly in a certain character and mental aspect. So they have narcissistic behaviors, but they cannot have the disorder yet.
Yeah, it hasn't grown into a disorder yet, at least.
Exactly. Because they're being like molded still into becoming an adult, right?
Yeah.
So exactly, that's perfect. Yeah. And then if you want to know about these traits, how like basically for this disorder, the main traits will be like they have a grandiose view of oneself. So they're like the last Coke of the desert, you know, the type of thing. They have zero they have zero empathy, they lack empathy, they have problems with empathy, they will never feel bad towards someone else, even though they're the responsible for the other person's suffering, in a way of like, if it's for me, like, fuck them, basically, in that behavior, right? They have this sense of entitlement, and the most important one, that it sometimes, when you behave in a narcissistic way, like you like act for the attention of others, or you want to, like, here and there, whatever. But they have this very important one, that is the need for admiration. They need to feel admired. They need to have someone to be like, you're the best, I'm gonna follow you through. And they have to give that as well to other people. Like, man, you need to listen to me because I'm better than you, I know what I'm doing, and that's it. And like, to put this into perspective, I wanted to give this perfect example, and then I'm gonna leave the floor to Aslan because he's gonna murder it. That, for example, a father, instead of caring for their spouse or their children, they use them as a source of attention and admiration. So instead of caring for their well-being, they're using them to get their own means of their own distorted concept of mind of having their needs taken care of.
Yeah, yeah. And it's kind of like, yeah, usually this happens when a parent has some kind of narcissistic, unresolved desires or something, dreams, narcissistic dreams, unfulfilled dreams, and they kind of put that on the child, and the child becomes like a narcissistic extension of the parent. Yeah, there are many examples of this, and the most common one is when your parent wants you to pursue a certain career. My kid is going to be a doctor, or my kid will be an engineer. My kid is going to be a lawyer. That's the common
classical
ones. Yeah. Or like a pianist, like an artsy one, kind of, right? And usually as a child, you don't really think about like, oh, is this something I want to do? You just kind of, you just take that on, and now you become like, you slowly start forming a second identity, which is an identity formed by the outer, like first your parents, and then in school and everywhere where your parents tell about it to everyone. So it kind of becomes your like outer identity.
Yeah.
Like, this kid is a pianist,
Like the shell, right?
Yeah.
Like your shell, like your protective.
Yeah. In Jungian terms, if you think about it, it's like the ego, or your persona, basically, where persona is essentially kind of masks that we wear in society, and if you in some ways, if you want to think in Jungian terms about it, it's kind of like you get a mask, your parent gives you a mask, and you start becoming identified with that mask. And if it progresses into something more serious in adulthood, it becomes internalized, and then you yourself cannot distinguish between who you really are and your persona.
Type of a personality disorder, right?
Yeah, and it can be very serious because it can really mess up your entire life. Because if you think about it, once again in Jungian terms, our main goal in life is to this mask is going to prevent you from doing that, because you're not going to your true self. You're not looking for your true self. You just keep living identified with this mask. And
Dude, that's crazy. Sorry to interrupt. No. It gave me, like, what you said about the mask. It reminded me of this like Japanese saying that people have three masks in their life.
Yeah.
One that they show like strangers are in the street. One that they show to their family and friends, and one that they show only to themselves.
Oh yeah.
Right, and that's because they're so interlinked with each other. Sometimes you don't know which one is which. But there's one that never is shown, like your true self, like also like in a Jungian, sorry, psychology. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And Yeah, I think like in this sense, like the way to approach this kind of narcissism would be to um, y- as a person, you basically need to form a deeper connection with your unconscious. And usually it can be super super hard because um, yeah, because now your behavior has changed, because this is something that I wanted to mention as well. I just remembered. Narcissists are usually looking for kind of this validation, or this kind of, they're feeding off of a certain validation. And their main, for some of them, some like kind of more like very negative forms of narcissism, their only goal is to get something out of the person, some kind of validation, some kind of a tribute.
Yeah.
And being in a relationship with a narcissist also, it's like you constantly need to feed their narcissistic
Yeah.
urges.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That's
and
horrible.
there's also dependent narcissism as well, where this person is kind of like very, yeah, very much looking for this kind of attention and care. And they also tend to be they tend to not be a very responsible person. Like their responsibility is usually thrown on other people. They take almost no responsibility.
And
That's
it's
kind
always
of,
justified, right?
yeah,
Like, this is not because of me, this is because of you.
yeah, I know. Yeah, that's kind of like a one way to tell if someone is narcissistic, is if they try to push all the responsibility on other people,
Yeah.
instead of taking it for themselves.
Like, even in a job place, right? In your working place,
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know if you have like a team leader or a boss or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, that if the team didn't like perform as expected, the boss, instead of like taking the responsibility
Yeah.
as it's supposed to, like, a good leader is
Uh-huh.
supposed to, is gonna be immediately say to his or her boss, like, it's not his fault of this guy who didn't do his job. Even though I
Yeah.
told him that he needed to do his job, and I
Yeah.
was under his ass telling him to do his job, but it's all because of him.
Yeah.
It's not my fault.
Yeah. It's crazy how it's so common, and
Very common.
very common. And I think a lot of people have that tendency to a certain degree as well. Like you have natural urges to do that sometimes. Like,
To like push the blame to someone else,
yeah,
because in your head you always did the right thing.
yeah. Yeah, it's like I think that's kind of like one of the like symptoms of like maybe you're a bit more narcissistic
Than the
than
normal,
than
right?
normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good way to tell, because I think I think I have those kind of natural urges more. But I think the main thing is to like be able to notice those, and I think that's something that distinguishes you from like how deeply do you identify with your persona, or this narcissistic persona that you have. Like, can you even distinguish, like can you even tell in the moments that you're being narcissistic, or
Yeah.
this is something where you're like absolving yourself of all responsibility?
Yeah.
Because there is a thin line, right? It's like a scale where like how much responsibility do you want to take for your actions?
Yeah. Yeah.
And some people take all the responsibility, and that's also not a good thing.
No. The two extremes are always bad,
Yeah.
right? And also, just to add to what you said, someone who is not able to ask for forgiveness or say sorry to one of his or her actions, that's also like a clear sign that they have, in their head at least, they have a sense of a narcissistic trait of being
Mm-hmm.
like, they don't need my apology, they don't deserve my apology, I didn't do anything wrong, I'm better.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I just wanted to add that
Yeah.
because
No,
it's
that's
also part
interesting.
of it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's kind of yeah, and it's like super 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 common, this kind of behavior. And I think also people who take all the responsibility are usually more neurotic people, where they, because once you do that, it puts a lot of pressure on you, so that's also like kind of you're being unfair to yourself as well. Um, but yeah, and one of the interesting ways that also like you can kind of deal with this if you're dealing with a narcissistic person is like mirroring, where you and the best example for this is kind of like just validating someone's feelings, because that's what they're kind of looking for, right? Like they're
Yeah.
looking for their feelings to be validated and reflected. So if they're feeling like, you know, they did something amazing, right, and they're looking for this kind of validation, you should reflect it to them by saying that, oh, that's amazing that you've done, that's great.
Yeah, they want to be seen, no?
Yeah, exactly. It can be healing in certain aspects. And that's kind of like one of the main, also one of the, as someone who's kind of outside, you can kind of deal with
Yeah.
that. But if you are the only way to really do it is like this, if you're a narcissistic person, I would say like doing this kind of internal work of like trying to identify your shadow, or like
Yeah, seeing your behavior. I just want to jump into that very quick. Like there, according to Duke Health, there are some signs that show like the narcissistic personality disorder. So if anyone has any of these traits or signs, or like has all of them, you know what I mean? Then there's something that you will need to, or will like to, or will want to change on its own, and it's been like the self-importance that you're always gonna be more important than anything or anyone else, and that's not true. You know what I mean? Like, I know this saying that you have to love yourself and put yourself first, and you do you, this kind of thing, of course, but there are situations where you have to understand that your presence or your role in this place is not the most important one.
Yeah.
As simple as that. And you need to be there to contribute and to help, not to be the one that is the main role. So if you think this doesn't apply to you, that's one of the signs. This is a really cool one. The preoccupation with status.
Okay.
I was seeing this thing that they were asking, like, if social media was generating more narcissistic behaviors in people, in percentage of the population. And the psychologist says that it's not the case that social media actually is creating more narcissist people, but it's a tool for narcissists to obtain what they're looking for. Attention with likes, with comments, with pictures, DMs, whatever. So it's kind of like in a bad way of social media being used to feed the ego of these individuals, like it is crazy. And that's like also like part of the preoccupation with status, like they have to be in a certain place that is like above other people or above their family, their friends, whatever. And this is the other one, that they also seek others with the same status or higher status than themselves. They cannot be seen, or they cannot be with someone who they deem less than themselves.
That's
right?
very interesting.
It is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Because you used to see this at school, at least when I was growing up, like with the popular kids.
Yeah.
Or like with people who are like, no, he's too weird. He doesn't deserve to be in our friend group. You're like, yeah, you're right. And then you grow up and you're like, what the fuck was I doing, man?
Yeah. And they're kind of in between themselves. They're very narcissistic, so they're using each other as well.
Yeah,
like
that's seek others with status. They're feeding each other in this certain aspect, which is crazy. And then another sign will be like the entitled. They feel that they're entitled. They feel that they deserve it. They have not earned it. They deserve it just by mere existing. And it is weird, because that's not true in life. If you're someone that takes advantage of other people, and
viewing people as a kind of for utility purposes, that's like very malignant as well.
Another one we're going to discuss of. But that's very...
You see people not as like people, but like something that you can use,
as object, as a quote-unquote type of object, just to get your mean. Just to obtain the end. So it could be like Machiavellical, very Machiavellical speaking. Like this person is just a means to your end.
Exactly.
right? And this is what many people like in narcissistic partnerships, like relationships, they tend to do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if, for example, I don't know, I was very infatuated with a girl over there, and I see that she's befriended this guy,
Mm-hmm.
I will only befriend him just to reach her.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You know, this is a very like
Yeah.
this is a very narcissistic behavior of taking advantage of someone with another mean or purpose.
Yeah.
And another one is will be like arrogance. I mean, all these, I would say, feelings in general, in both extremes are bad. You cannot be like extremely arrogant, but you cannot be like zero arrogant. You need to be arrogant in certain aspects to put yourself in value. Like, I'm arrogant enough to know the value of my work. So I'm not gonna sell my art, for example, if you're a painter, for less than €2
Mm-hmm.
or $2 or whatever, knowing that you have to put a value on yourself. So a little bit of arrogance and be like, no, this is worth 15, period. You know? And then you cannot be like the total opposite, that is like, because I made it, it's worth $15,000,000,000.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it doesn't work like that. So,
Yeah.
you know, depends on the type of arrogance that you have. Then they lack empathy. They lack empathy, like zero empathy. They will never feel bad for anyone. I think one common example that I used to live this, it's a common thing in Mexico that they used to say, like when they see like vagabonds or homeless people in the
Okay.
streets or stuff, is like they're there because they don't work. You know, it's not that the system failed on them.
Yeah.
They're there because of their own merit. They don't work, so I'm not gonna feel empathy for them.
Oh, fuck, yeah.
It's very complicated subject between anyone writes in the comments. I know,
Yeah.
because there are circumstances that life is life and humans are humans, right?
Yeah.
But like the just the idea of like someone is suffering because of their own thing in a certain aspect, yeah, you're responsible of your life. I get that. But like the idea of like, I'm not gonna feel empathy because they deserve where they are, type of thing. If you take it to the extreme, then it will be like a very narcissistic thing to do, right? Or then like, I use this guy to like, I befriended this guy to get to this girl. Once when I'm with the girl, fuck him, I don't need him anymore. And I don't have absolutely no empathy for him. Like, he's like, dude, you use me. He's like, well, fuck you. You know, that's another example.
Yeah.
And the other two is like being envious, which is funny. Envy. Feel like being envy of someone else, especially like close one. A common example will be like the sibling who is envious of her sibling, because she believes in her eyes that she's getting more attention, that she's getting more cool stuff, or like that her parents love her more or love him more. So like, he's very jealous and envious of this because he or whatever don't believe that her or his sibling actually deserves it. They're worse than them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Because it's also like being very self-centered and thinking only about yourself. Like, I deserve this.
Yes. It's like, no, my sister needs to be below me because I'm better than her.
Yeah.
Like, she's the second sister.
Yeah.
You know, like this type of thing. And it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. But whatever. And then of course, the most important one, the most typical or classical, or the way that you always will see a narcissistic person, will be like someone that needs admiration. You know, someone that is looking to get admiration from someone else.
Yeah, that's like core.
Yeah, exactly. Like, one of the core things is like, hey, why are you doing this? I'm doing it because it's helping me. I'm doing it because it's part of my job. No, I'm doing it because I want people to see how good I am in doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's usually very kind of under the hood type of thing. Because like one of the examples of also one of the types of narcissist is like an alpha narcissist. And it's kind of the people who are very obsessed with control and like having control over things. That's kind of like the main trait of those kind of people, and they usually end up being in positions of like the CEOs or like also trial lawyers.
Yeah, of power, right?
Yeah. And yeah, that's also a very interesting kind of form of narcissism. And the funny thing is you can kind of be like, okay, I'm making this company, or I have this dream, I'm making this, but then underneath that, you like, I am here because I enjoy this, actually, control and like being able to manage this many people. And the funny thing is that a lot of times these kind of people can end up going into companies and actually getting quite higher up in the ranks, but not always do they actually end up benefiting the company, because if your only goal is control, you're not actually that good. Like, you're good for the role, but you're not, like, it's a weird thing. Like, you're not good you're not good as a employee. Like, you're not good for the company. Like, because you're not interested in pushing the company forward. You kind of just
you're
think
doing
about
it for
yourself.
your own self. Like, for your own self, whatever.
Yeah, you want control, but then what are you gonna do with that control?
Yeah, just be toxic.
Thing. Yeah, exactly.
Just generate this horrible area, like fume. What's this type of narcissist called again? The alpha one?
Yeah.
Dude, I liked it. Of control. Man, it's like, also I was reading this article. To be honest, I don't remember exactly who wrote it or what was the name, but in one of the pages it said that, because you talk about CEOs, it said that like there's a percentage of the population who is considered legally like a psychopath, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to murder someone to be a psychopath. For example, there's different variations of psychopath. And they say that of the world's populations of CEOs, like 36% of them will be legally considered psychopaths. So it's like, it is impressive also the idea that narcissist behaviors, or like very high level of narcissism, is involved into this type of roles of power, right? It's like, not everyone who looks for power is a narcissist, but the majority of narcissists look for power. It's like someone who is looking to be a politician, like looking for power and looking to like be a master of something doesn't have to be negative, but like it depends how you use it. You can be like, I want to have power in a political aspect so I can help people out, or I want to be the best, I don't know, painter because I want to pursue the best of myself. Instead of saying like, I want to be the best painter so people just can do a shrine on me. Type of like.
It's a weird thing in our culture where these kind of things can, like, you can end up really successful and kind of go under the radar as a big narcissistic person. Because a lot of the traits are rewarded in like the worst aspects of our culture today. Especially when it comes to art and these kind of things, where you're like, having this confidence to sell yourself, like, I'm the best.
Yeah. I'm the best and there's no one else.
Because you don't care about criticism, or like, because if you're really narcissistic, you're just gonna keep pushing your view, and you don't care about, like, you're not affected by people's opinions that much about you. Like, you probably won't have imposter syndrome.
No, it's not. Yeah, for sure. And that's good that you said something which is super true. You can become a narcissist. Not necessarily like, it was like in your DNA or whatever you want to say. You can become one. It's the typical, like the typical athlete in any sport that you see, that they come from nowhere, from the bottom of the bottom, and they fight their way through to become like one of the best players of whatever. And then you see the differentiation between when they started and when they ended. And like, for example, Maradona. Like, it's impressive the way of, like, the level of narcissism that he had on himself at the end of his like career in life, because he was like the best player at some point of football in the world. But the way he started, he was a very humble person who was just there to prove something to someone, that he was an amazing player, right? So like the where he developed himself in the career, when people are praising him and like saying like you're the best or whatever, helped to develop this narcissistic like tendency and behavior on himself. So that is also something that you have to be aware of. maybe like where you are is not the best place you should be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, it also speaks about like if you get to a certain level of success, there's also a lot of work that you have to do to maintain that success. It's not just like, okay, I'm the winner, I'm the best, and then basking in your
Yeah.
success.
Yeah. What's the saying go? How does the saying goes? Like absolute power
Corrupts?
corrupts absolutely.
I guess so. I don't know.
Something like that, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It's also like type of corrupts your character as
Yeah,
well, and your
for sure.
makes you like become a piece of shit, maybe.
Yeah, but how did so because I don't know much about Maradona's story in at the latter half of his life. Did it kind of end up biting him, this kind of narcissistic behavior, or no, he was chill kind of?
No, yeah, like I'm not an expert either,
Okay.
but I can tell you for sure, like just by the classics, that he was like the people player. He made Napoli win his like title, his Italian title. Everybody in Naples love him. Everybody in Argentina, they even consider him like
Yeah, I mean, I know that.
he won the World Cup.
He's like the best.
Yeah,
legend.
Yeah, he's a legend. He's a legend when it comes to football. When he comes like a person, like he became an addict, like a cocaine addict. He was like in Cuba for like for rehab many times. He like overcharged everything he did because he was like Maradona.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
like
yeah,
he was
yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm the best of everything, and he behaved very responsible and very radic, sorry.
Yeah.
Like later on in his life, in everywhere he was, there's this video that is crazy, man. That is like they asked him to please play with this handicapped kid just for like making because one of the dreams of the kid was to play with Maradona.
Okay.
And he's like a goalkeeper, the kid that has like no leg or something like that. And then like he was like, let's do a penalty goal.
Okay.
You know? And Maradona shoots and scores. And not only that, he goes running around saying that he scored like goal to this handicapped kid.
Oh my God.
Dude, it's like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
this is so unnecessary.
Yeah.
And he didn't give a single shit.
Lack of consideration for other people.
Lack of empathy.
Yeah.
Lack of empathy. Instead of making this kid like the best day of his life, he made it the worst day of his life.
Maybe in his head he was like he's gonna enjoy it. Maybe the kid like he made a story of how it's gonna be good for the kid.
Yeah, well, yeah, that will be like one of those behaviors, right? I did this because he's of his own good. I'm the best.
Yeah, yeah.
That's something fucking crazy, right? Like who
Yeah.
like imagined that? But yeah, I can give you that example about him.
Another example is like the Conor McGregor thing, no? Kind of.
Yeah,
He
love you,
also
Connor.
No, because
he got it off
I
his
thought about
head.
him as well because he was like super humble guy and he was like all about the like the art of fighting and
Dude, he was
technique.
gonna be a plumber
Yeah.
in Ireland.
Yeah,
And he
yeah.
was like, fuck that, I'm gonna become one of the greatest fighters ever.
Yeah.
And like his wife backed him up and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And he did become like
Yeah, no, it was very good.
whatever they say about him, I have to say he was the first person in UFC history that had like two titles at the same time in different weights, like categories. Like,
Yeah.
but like yeah, he had unfortunately his fame got into his head.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
he was always like a talker and like, but that's part of the sport, right?
Yeah, it's part of the sport. And I think there's something about his personality that works for like he was I think naturally good at like this kind of confidence, this
Yeah.
like I'm the best kind of thing.
It's
Already
yeah.
he kind of had seeds of kind
Yeah.
of this thing.
Yeah, it's impressive, like his visualization, like
Yeah.
the way he was
Yeah.
always saying, I'm the champion, I'm the champion, I'm the champion. This type of thing, that's perfectly fine. But like hitting an old man in a bar,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is when, and there's nothing wrong, we all fuck it up. Well, actually, yeah, that's something very wrong, sorry. We all fuck up, but I mean, the thing is that continuing with the same behavior,
Yeah.
that's the issue. You
Yeah.
know, it doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
there's like, what would be the definition of insanity?
doing the same thing over and over
and expect
with
different
different
results.
results. Yeah.
That's also like a way of, it's a narcissistic approach if you think about it, to be like, I'm doing this, why is not happening? Why the results that I want to are not happening? Probably because everyone else is bullshit. Probably because it's not my fault, it's everybody else's fault. It's
Yeah.
not the way I'm doing things, it's the way everyone else is doing things. That's why it's not like going on for me, you know? This is like the mentality of it, and it is very, very wrong.
Yeah, it's very interesting because like it's kind of that, I think, archetypal story of like you're like this humble, you start from humble beginnings and like you're really good at something, you work hard, you get amazing, and then you end up being really successful, and then
Yeah.
you have that, you think it's going to be easier. I think people think it's going to be easier after you get to a certain level, but actually you have more challenges now as a successful person, and not everyone can can still keep that same level of humbleness and like discipline, and it's like 10 20 times harder like
Also,
than
like,
before,
of
because you have
course.
more temptations now, and like everyone's feeding your narcissistic
Dude,
urges.
yes. Like the environment that you are in, if you don't put boundaries and if you don't like actually properly work with it,
Yeah.
then it's gonna eat you alive.
Yeah, you need to do a lot of work on yourself.
Yes, on literally, like I think you will need to keep like 15 diaries at the same time because it should be insane. I don't know about it, but like I haven't lived
No,
it.
it will fuck
But
anyone up. I think like if you let it, like it's such a
yeah, like like you start like you have to believe it from yourself. You don't have to believe it from anyone else.
yeah.
That's the thing. And when someone else is feeding you this crap and then it's like inflating your ego, that's an issue because it's feeding on your narcissistic on your narcissistic trait.
Yeah, it's such a crazy thing that a lot of people are like in our society there is this thing about like you want to be successful, you want to be the best, like it's all about the journey to get to that level, but not a lot of people think about like once you get there there's like another journey for you.
Yeah,
Like,
they're like,
that's
I
not the
reached
end.
it. That's it, right? It's like, no, man, this is just the beginning.
Yeah,
This is the first hurdle. Like, well, not the first hurdle, but it's another hurdle.
another
Then you
hurdle.
have to keep it up,
Then you
man.
have to keep it up, like, which is just the same thing that
You,
you did before. Like, you're not gonna relax.
yeah, dude, it was funny that you mentioned it because there's like this interview with this famous influencer. Actually, Annie told me about her.
Okay.
She, if I'm not mistaken, she's the wife of the Gypsy King's brother.
Okay.
The Gypsy King, the famous boxer.
Okay. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And I think she's from the UK and she became like a famous influencer. And when her manager tells her like, hey, when she reached one like I don't know how many $1 million, it's like, hey, dude, you made it. Now you're like in this level of like professionalism and stuff. Like, what do you want? She's like, oh, I'm gonna buy this amazing car that I have always dreamed of. And I think it was like these SUVs that are like very like amazing luxury cars and stuff. And it's like, okay, and then what? Oh, well, I haven't thought about it. And the manager was like, well, then don't buy the car yet. You know? Because if you don't have like an idea of what you're doing
Yeah. Oh, that's
things for, then you're gonna lose focus, you're gonna lose passion, you're gonna lose like the way of it, then you're just gonna be eating it up.
Yeah, because you have a choice, right? Like, what do you want to feed in yourself? This narcissistic monster or your true
Self.
Like, what do you want to feed?
Dude, yeah. And
Yeah.
oh my God, I need to go with this, talking about the narcissistic monster. So according to the psychologist Dr. Rumani, there are like these 4 types of narcissism. There's, as we've seen, there are many types of narcissism, and there's different types of narcissistic behaviors. But of these 4 types, she says, like the grandiose that we discussed about previously, and the covert or vulnerable one. And then she talks about the 3rd one, that is the malignant.
Okay.
Because when you said that, it just like ring into my head. The malignant narcissist is a personality type that causes extreme narcissism, aggression, and sometimes abuse of others, uses manipulative means or violence to enhance their own sense of well-being.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, like, I think the classical example will be in a relationship, the abusive relationship. From the guy hitting the girl, or from a guy to another guy, or from a girl to another girl, or even from a girl to another guy, or from the mother to a daughter. Like these ideas of like using the extreme of just like keeping someone so down that you like they can control, they can manipulate, they can just like,
Yeah.
you know, and it's like, you talk back to me, bomb. Like, you know, there's gonna be physical violence if you actually try to do something. So not only like your integrity is like in peril, like your entire well-being is in peril. You know, like, and
yeah, that's like also kind of like not just narcissism, but also sociopathy or psychopathy also mixed into that as well.
a sociopath they have like very high levels of narcissism.
Yeah, yeah.
And they also like they lack a lot of empathy. They wouldn't be able to literally torture someone if they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's crazy how, I mean, I'm sure a lot of viewers as well are like thinking about all like these people that they've met
in
their lives.
Life, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like,
it's
oh
like,
shit,
motherfucker.
so that's what's wrong with you.
Sending a WhatsApp right now to their boyfriend. You son of a bitch. You know what? But yeah. But
it's crazy to think about it, that people, because it's crazy to fathom or imagine what it would be like to think like that, like thinking of, like, you think of others as like the same way as like food. Like when you go to a store, you're like, I want to buy you know, a piece of bread or something. Imagine if you're this kind of a narcissist, that's how you view other people.
Yeah.
Like a piece of bread.
Yeah. It's like, it's not a human being, it's not a living thing, it's just something that means nothing to me. And I don't care if it gets hurt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's crazy. It's just lack of empathy, like the biggest part of it.
Impressive lack of empathy.
Yeah.
I mean, the last one I have for you guys, and the one I found the most, I don't want to use the word appealing, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the communal narcissist.
Communal
Narcissist is he or she who wants to be perceived as virtuous, generous, and of an important social and moral leader of society.
Ooh.
Dude, the first thing that comes into my mind will be like a cult leader.
Yeah.
Like someone who shows themselves as this type of guru, you know, or a politician.
Politicians. I thought of politicians.
Yeah, they're coming here to fix all the mistakes that you're actually worried about, you know, man, like, and actually behind the scenes, they're like a bunch of pedophiles, or like, or like they're a psychopath or a sociopath that actually kills people.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Or like there's a famous called The Happening, of course, Texas. Sorry, beforehand. Yeah. Well, oh my God. That this guy was like, he created this cult, and he wanted like his followers to be perceived, like to perceive him as like almost like Jesus Christ type of thing, but like underwater, like under the scenes, like outside of people's view. He will use to have sex with all the women there, just, and even like underage women, like underage girls, just for the fact and that he said that this was the way that God intended them to to do things and this type of thing. And it was crazy, man. Like, this is a very like high narcissistic communal that is like, I am chosen by divinity, but at the same time I'm gonna do atrocities behind them.
But they justify it, like
he justified in a way that is God is God's will.
Isn't there a film about it or no?
There's a documentary about him. about this cult as well. To be honest,
Okay.
I remember this because it impacted me when I was looking at it. I was like, and I just remember like talking about this, and I was like, fuck, I don't remember exactly which documentary and which cult is talking about. You can do your research again, but I'm not lying. He did this, and it is like the best way or example to describe this type of narcissist.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think like it's much more common, especially with politicians. I think it's kind of the people that are in front of you, because cult leaders are kind of like behind the scenes, like you don't really see them like that in the spotlight.
But their image,
Their
that's the
image,
thing.
yeah.
They're portrayed to be like a white dove, but actually they're not.
Yeah.
They're the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think like what leads to that is this kind of belief that you have the keys, you have the solutions, you're the person to lead everyone into this whatever the goal is.
I'm here to help you with your suffering. And with all the bullshit you're going through, I will make your life better. You know, like I'm the answer to your prayers type of thing, and then be like see you next Tuesday kind of person. So I can't, in case anyone didn't understand.
Well, I think we covered a lot of things, no? I mean,
I would like you to like go a little bit like deeper into the Jungian one, though.
Oh, Jungian.
Yeah.
Well, I think I think I mentioned most of the things I wanted to mention about Jung, because I don't think there's because like with Jung there's well, one of the things that's interesting about Jung is that like what I mentioned before about the false identification with the persona.
Yeah.
That's kind of that's not the whole picture, but that's, if you want to look at it in Jungian terms, that's one way of looking at it, is that a person who's a narcissist is someone who's like very, very identified with their external persona, whatever that may be. Usually, obviously, it's something that you present to the society. And obviously, this is not something that by itself is like a very malignant thing.
Yeah.
It can be very benign. Obviously, the only person you're going to be hurting is yourself in that case, because in Jungian psychology, our goal is to individuate and to get to our highest, our true self, and this is the self archetype. It's you. It's not your ego. It's you throughout all your life, kind of summarized as one thing. And in many religions, this is portrayed in different symbolisms. Like this self,
your soul type of thing.
Yeah, in Christianity, notably, it's the most I think the most concrete one. It's Jesus.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
A representation of the person that, well,
you need to aspire to become, type of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of because it's like it's very complex. I don't want to expand on it in this episode, but in Carl Jung wrote a lot about this in his book Ion. He talked about this whole thing with Christianity and the symbolism of the self. But basically, yourself is someone who contains both the dark aspects and the light aspects of yourself.
Yeah.
And also Jesus is this just an archetypal it's kind of, it's first of all, it's a person, but also a divine being, kind of.
It's like human, but at the same time it's more than, right?
Yeah. It's something that, it's like this perfect image that you're striving towards. And Jesus also has like he has a divine side again and a human side to him. So it's kind of like this duality again, because God only is divine.
Yeah.
There is no humanity there. Like there is no limitation.
Yeah.
And the idea of the Jesus is very, very revolutionary and very unique to Christianity, because this is where God comes down and feels what it's like to be mortal, to be able to die, to be human. And yeah, because God, because if a God is above, he doesn't he doesn't know what it's like to be human,
Yeah.
the limitation of being a human. And in the Old Testament, God is not a human. He's like, and he always punishes everyone left and right. You know, it's like, you don't live up to this.
As well,
Yeah, you don't live up to my thing, I'll burn you down your village or whatever. You know,
Yeah,
it's like, I'll punish you.
It's a vengeable God, like
Yeah.
Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, because of their sins.
Yeah, and this is because he's incomplete. He's in the Old Testament. He's just, there's only one aspect to him, and you know, there's Jung wrote a lot about how in Christianity there is no feminine side to Christianity, like that is repressed. So God actually is not connected with his feminine side, which is kind of like his shadow, basically. Yeah, God's shadow.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because he's not total, like, and then he obtains this wholeness in the New Testament with the Jesus and the
We should like dive into this topic
Probably,
in another
yes.
episode. This actually
yeah,
sounds
yeah,
very
yeah.
cool.
So yeah, long story short, you have yourself, your ideal self that you want to get to, and yeah, it's something that takes. It's like a journey that your whole life you're gonna do it, but there are certain things that you can do to be on the right track, basically.
Yeah.
And one of them is delving deeper in yourself to try to identify your shadow, right? Because that's the only way you can access that, is to go through your shadow. And these are things that you have repressed, things that you don't want to admit about yourself. And when you go deeper into this, you're getting closer to yourself, to your real true self, without all the external persona that society imposes on you. And yeah, so forming a deeper relationship with your subconscious is something that really helps with this. And also, one of the things that has been shown to be beneficial for like kind of healing from narcissism is going through a big traumatic event that kind of puts you in that almost like a childhood version of yourself. Like, it strips you down of everything.
Puts your life into a perspective,
Yeah.
right? Like,
yeah. Like, you get into a big accident, you end up in the hospital for, weeks.
your inflated ego realizes that you're not actually immortal, sorry. You're not like the best thing, that you're a fragile human being.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also, that's actually very cool. Just to add, like almost at the end, but just to add, if anyone is interested in trying to figure out their narcissistic traits or work on them, of course, therapy is like the best thing you could do, because you can work with a professional.
Mm-hmm.
But like in many other things, is to be aware of your behaviors and to question yourself if what you did was actually a narcissistic thing to do, for example. No, if you hurt someone by a comment or like an act or whatever you're going through, and that way you can see how you're operating in life, having someone else tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sometimes we are like always like, self-criticism is important, right? It is important, but then like others' criticism is always as well very important.
Yeah, for sure.
Because they're seeing you from other eyes, and many things that you do them unconsciously. So that's why it's important to do your shadow work, to see how you're behaving with others and with yourself. And just the first step for everything, I would like to say that the first step for everything will be to be aware. To be aware of your own behavior, to be aware of your own bullshit. If you are like interested in changing something into the better, of course.
Yeah, and maybe even meditating can be.
Yes.
Because when you said being aware of these things, I think meditation can be very beneficial. Because you're just sitting down and you're letting all these thoughts appear.
Yeah, for sure. And feelings as well. The type of feelings that you're feeling, and go through them, like interpret them. That's also like an important one.
Yeah, it's like being able to, because one thing because for a lot of people, the benefit of meditation is being able to notice your thoughts, because most people don't really notice their thoughts as something outside of them. Like it's something that appears, but they identify with their thoughts.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that you cannot distinguish of like what's me and what's a thought.
Yeah.
You know, you just like, oh, I have a thought, that's me, I believe this, you know. But if you meditate, you learn to be like, oh, that's a thought, that's another thought, that's a feeling, that's another feeling. So you can kind of already prime your brain to be able to
differentiate them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're kind of, it's not gonna directly help you with kind of dealing with narcissism, but it's gonna, or identifying narcissism in yourself, but it's gonna help you form like tools to do it, because if you haven't been doing it already, or if you're not if you're not someone who's very in tune with your thoughts and emotions.
Yeah. Like 100% agreeing. Very well, very well put in.
Yeah.
Okay, guys and beautiful watchers and everyone. I think we have come to an end for this episode. Yep. We appreciate you all. We send you a lot of love to everyone.
Yep.
If you're interested in anything that we said, you know that there's always the comments below. You can put any question and we're gonna get back to you as soon as we can. Don't forget that we're also doing the research and investigating this, so we're no experts, but we are very like...
we like discussing interesting topics.
We like to go into this type of things.
Getting to the bottom of things.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Sending a lot of love. And see you on the next episode.